I am resident of Collinwood for YouTube. Joel Saints. That's my buddy Patrick McCray. That's my buddy Alan Gallant. We're here to review the movie Man on the Moon, which is the movie about the life and death of Andy Kaufman, who was an entertainer slash comedian slash stand-up guy. Also in Taxi, he was in the TV show Taxi. He was on Saturday Night Live. He did wrestling in
He's
Memphis.
the star of Heartbeeps.
Yes.
Bernadette Peters.
So
Yes.
usually I ask you guys when you first watch a movie, but instead, when did you first see or hear of Andy Kaufman, Alan?
1975, Saturday Night Live. He did his record routine and his Elvis routine. First time they had him on.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
Patrick.
when he came to save the day.
Yeah, it is when he came to save the day. It's Mighty
That's
Mouse.
true.
Yeah.
That is true. God, I remember that, and it was one of the funniest things
It
I
was.
had ever seen.
His whole countenance made it work. You know, his
Yes.
whole. He was brilliant. I would describe him as a performance artist more than a comedian. A performance artist who happened to be
Sure.
hilarious sometimes. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. I just amazing.
Yeah.
So I saw him in Taxi. It was a few years later, and the show had just premiered, and my father, who knew I'd watch anything with Judd Hirsch, like any 7-year-old.
Of course.
Like any 7-year-old, I was naturally excited about the new Judd Hirsch project.
Right.
And he said, there's this guy on it named Latka, and you got to see him. And he was just magnetically interesting.
Yes.
It's a little disheartening to know how much Kaufman hated the character because he was so good.
Yes.
And he did so well.
I think he more hated the fact that they wanted him to show pony the character than hating the actual character. That they wanted him,
that was his
and all of that. I think he hated that, and it's true what they do in the movie and depict in the movie is true. He did it in order to get the concessions that he got, so that he could do things and have his special and all of that sort of thing. So, and basically they took it all away from him. Or he kind of forced their hand, considering
he did
doing. But.
He did. He and Zamuda always kind of treated that like, oh well, that's a victory too.
Yeah.
I always wonder how much of that's cover story.
Well, I'm sure that they suffered for some of the stuff, no doubt about it. But
we
some
wanted
of
to
it
get
was
fired.
Yeah, some of it was
mainstream, man.
Yeah.
Okay, it's mainstream. It's still
a
TV special.
That's right.
Yeah.
So when did you guys first see the movie Man on the Moon? This movie.
The day it came out, I made it part of my exam for an acting class I was teaching, and we spent about a week talking about Andy Kaufman and whether or not this was art, whether or not it was theater, whether or not it was acting. Largely because I knew the movie was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted an excuse to go see it, and our exam was that day. It was that Friday, and it was maybe the last half Friday before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I got to do this. This is too good. This is a moment to abuse your power as a teacher for the right reasons.
For the force
and
right.
And the school thought it was fine, and it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the parents thought it was fine. The kids thought it was fine. So we had a good time. Then we went out to lunch and just had a discussion.
Yeah.
And it was terrific. The best exam I ever did.
Cool.
And the kids, you know what? The kids really brought it. They brought some sharp analytical skills, and so it justified the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God.
Thank God. You never know with those kind of things.
Yeah.
Is this the most underrated Jim Carrey movie, you think?
He's made some pretty underrated movies.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's rated fairly accurately. I think, even though it only got a 64 Rotten Tomatoes score. It's a Milos Forman movie. It's going to be great.
Yeah. And he's transformative in the role too.
Oh, and man.
People knew it at the time. It wasn't something that developed over time with appreciation. People knew that this was a performance, a really high caliber performance.
I think it was so immersed. That's one of the reasons why he wasn't critically recognized. Well, of course, he's going to go into character completely as Andy Kaufman. Well,
right.
Like that's easy.
Like that's easy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think they're so threatened by it, they wrote it off.
Study him for a year in order to be able to do that correctly.
And he auditioned for the part.
Yeah.
He auditioned against Edward Norton and somebody else, Idris Elba. It was someone.
Yeah. The first time I saw or heard of Andy Kaufman was when I was watching wrestling over at my grandma and grandpa's house. And they were watching, my grandfather, when he wasn't watching Westerns, would watch ESPN Classic. And wrestling was on. That's how I heard of Haystack Calhoun as well.
Uh-huh.
And Bruno Sammartino and stuff like that. And he was watching, there was this really skinny guy wrestling. I asked my grandpa, I said, who is that nerdy? Who's that weird guy wrestling those women, Grandpa? He goes, oh, that's Andy Kaufman. And he told me who he was and stuff. And
this was before Ben Kingsley started doing it.
It's true.
And my grandmother told me about him too. And I found him really entertaining and interesting as a heel. Wrestling the women, and when Jerry Lawler started kicking his ass too, I listened to so many interviews about Andy from not just Jerry but James Cornette or James E. Cornette. Jim Cornette, for those who don't know, was a manager of the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express. But before that, he was the photographer for Memphis Wrestling, and he himself had said nobody was smartened up right away. He goes, we did not know what was real, what was fake.
That's
we had no clue. He said, and here's a guy who's coming to the ring, taking the pictures for the show. And there were three people who knew. It was Jerry Jarrett, the promoter, Jerry Lawler, and the writer. Jerry Lawler, the writer, or Kaufman too. So four people who knew, and that was it.
And there's a guy named John Barton from England. He was crucial to it. But he didn't get enough credit.
He infused it with its Shakespearean weight.
That's right. John Barton was way into it. Anyway, Joel, keep going.
But they kept it very close. They didn't tell the boys right away. When the boys were finally smartened up is when they were finally smartened up near the end when everybody decides to jump, where Andy Kaufman has everybody jump Lawler and stuff like that. All the heels.
Well, yeah, he and Lawler teamed up for a while, and then split up, and it was like a Neil Simon comedy from the era, really, like Chapter 2. You never know if they were united or against each other.
The thing that was really intense was when they appeared together on the Letterman show, and Letterman was not in on it at all.
No,
like completely flat.
Now it seems like I think Dave was.
Do you think he was?
Yeah, that's the thing that's come out recently.
Okay,
is that Letterman was more in on it than it looked, but it's kayfabe to maintain this other identity. Letterman went deep dish into character. And would not come out. But yeah, they were much more professional about it than it seemed. Just that, as long as they could emotionally abuse Andy's parents and Lynn Margulies to get genuine performances out of them. Jeez.
Yeah, unfortunate. That was an unfortunate. I will say something about this movie, and that is that this is one of the few times that I really cared about Courtney Love. She gives a nice, affecting performance. I thought, it's very straightforward. She doesn't try to do anything weird or complex.
Well, she doesn't try that in her other movie, in the other Foreman picture she did, which is
right.
versus Larry
Which
Flint.
again, I thought she was kind of good in that, but she was more the drug-addled version of herself in that movie.
Meaning just herself.
Yes.
I thought because she really cleaned up to do the work.
Yeah.
In both movies.
Yes, she did.
I get very I don't know why, but I get very kind of verklempt about Courtney Love in that period, because for me in these two pictures she manages to be a luminous star. I think she's wonderful. She's beautiful and glamorous and smart and funny and free, and what a wonderful voice in Hollywood.
Right.
And after a life of so much turbulence and pain. And I get experimenting in that and then going away to say that you did the Hollywood thing and then moving on. I get that. But I go into mourning over the interesting performer that we kind of
she could have had more. Yeah, she could have had more.
I think she's just terrific in this, and she is so warm and likable, and she's exactly the person that Andy needs.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is the same Courtney Love who was married to Kurt Cobain, right?
That's right. The same Courtney Love that was into drugs and alcohol and was an absolute miserable bad girl for years as well.
Lead singer of Hole.
Yeah, I think, and I'm not making excuses for it because she was a drug addict and stuff. When Kurt obviously committing suicide, and after that, really, a lot of fans of Nirvana and stuff were pointing their finger at her. A lot of people thought she did it for years and years, even during this time while this was going on, this was filming.
Sure.
So, I mean,
original rock and roll conspiracy theory.
Yeah, you're right. That's.
Yeah.
I heard all about that.
Part of that was because she was such an abrasive personality at that point, because they had both been doing heroin together and cocaine and booze and everything else you could think of. So she was a mess, right at that time in the early 90s when all that was going down. She was a bit of a mess until she got cleaned up.
Yeah.
Late 80s, 90s,
Well, I mean, it'd be late 90s, mid to late 90s, because 96 is when she was shooting up. No, when she was shooting
versus Larry Flint.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does do a really, really great job in this movie and performs very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Danny DeVito is obviously really great in this movie. I've always enjoyed his work.
She's much better, I would say, than the next name that might be in the Rolodex there, and that's Paul Giamatti, who I never really buy in the film.
Yeah.
Well, he's telegraphing a performance as the best friend.
Right.
But I don't buy him as a truly spontaneous, interesting, comical genius, which Bob Zmuda is.
Right, but I think part of the problem was that Bob Zmuda was probably breathing down his neck the whole damn time.
Bob Zmuda was breathing down his neck the whole time, yeah. Yeah, it couldn't have been fun.
No.
Speaking of which, so there's a great story I gotta tell real fast about having somebody breathe down your neck. And this is it's a Philippe Mora story. So it ties into Return to Captain Invincible and Howling 2.
Okay.
And 3. And it's when they're making the movie Communion with that was the Whitley Strieber UFO Anal Probe Festival.
Yes.
And Strieber gets some disturbing news about the dailies. And he calls the set. He says, I want to talk to Christopher Walken. So he puts Christopher Walken on the phone and says, Walken, I hear you're making me look like a real asshole. Well, I guess I'm doing a good job. And then hangs up.
That would be Christopher Walken. Yes. Yes.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Who by that time knows what kind of leverage he has in the film that he does.
Well, considering what a small project Communion was, and what a big star Christopher Walken was at the time, they were lucky that he even walked by the soundstage.
Yeah.
Wait. Well, here's my question on that, real quick. Why did Walken do it? Was he under
To
contract?
get to the other side.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I mean, the book Communion was huge.
Yeah.
So I suspect that the producers it was a real kind of Cubby Broccoli or the Ilya Salkind kind of move. I think the producers put all of their money, because they didn't put it into the director, put all of their money into Chris Walken. And I suspect he got points on it. And it was just, I would love to have a pool. Yes, let's do it.
Yeah.
So, guys, what did you think of Jim Carrey's performance as Andy Kaufman here?
It's nervous breakdown worthy. It's that friggin' close, close to the bone. And I think he did have a bit of a nervous breakdown, actually, in some ways, or at least he got too deep into it, at least according to certain reports. But it's a brilliant performance.
Yeah,
it's sacrifice for brilliance, I think, in this case.
I mean, he somehow auto-hypnotized himself so that instinctively the reactions of Andy Kaufman would be his. That's the only way. He almost Stockholm syndromed himself.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently he had been working on this performance for years.
Yeah.
And that, like anybody who does a good impression, and I know that generally the term good impression is one that an actor would be furious to hear.
Because it sounds too superficial. But
in this case, I really
it is. But it's also, of course, you've got all the acting depth.
It is just this totally immersive act that you can drop into pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That does involve some externals, but those externals are coming from someplace, and by God, they make brilliant creative choices with you.
Right.
And that's what I see here. I mean, it's just I think, again, why didn't this performance get more attention? I think because it made people uneasy with how deep it was.
Right.
It's almost like there's an agreement with actors that you can go deep, but you don't have to go too deep. We still like being reminded it's you and being reminded this is the real world, because there's something very threatening about actors. I mean, that's why in the Middle Ages they were burned at the stakes, in between towns at crossroads, and that they probably gave half the town syphilis. So there is something eerie and shamanic about acting, and then you have the embodiment of it right there.
I'll say this. This is the movie that made me really appreciate documentary movies in a way of being made by somebody who's acting the real life person. And because after this, when they had announced the movie Ali, that Will Smith was going to do Ali, I went in theaters and saw Ali. Actually, I took Julie. Julie.
It was so long.
That's what was said about Ali.
Well,
right.
Many times.
That's why his trunks went down below his knees in many of his fights.
How long?
It was so long.
That's what they say.
Yeah,
Just keep moaning that.
He was falling asleep on it. But I enjoyed it. I mean, because I learned about Muhammad. I learned about Muhammad Ali in history class. But
no, that's all right.
But yeah, this movie is really well acted by Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey does a really great job of not just becoming Andy Kaufman, but being him. And
there's an irony in the casting too.
Yeah.
Because if you notice that one of the main actors in Taxi Show can't reprise his role in the Taxi.
That's right, because he's already playing George Shapiro.
That's right.
And he's, DeVito's very good in this because he's clearly recalling his feelings for Andy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all he has to do is just go there.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's a cheat He's got a cheat code.
He's already has an inside. Yeah.
He does. And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just, it is such a nimble abuse of personal pain and love.
And as I would say, it's also very sweet.
Oh, it's so sweet.
It is.
It's so affectionate.
Yeah.
And that Shapiro be one of the people involved with the movie and is in the movie.
Yeah. I actually like how they introduced Tony Clifton, and that's what the phone call.
Now, Jewel, a thing for you to find. It's especially good if you have the website Scribed, which is my subscription has lapsed, unfortunately. And that's the screenplay to the Tony Clifton story, which has always been left out of this movie. But it is this screenplay that they've written that turns Andy into the villain, because you have Andy in his portrayal of Tony Clifton, and then the real Tony Clifton that would either be played by Andy or by Bob Zmuda, one or the other. And they take all of Tony's affectations and they turn them just a little sweet.
Yeah.
And it really works. And it goes back and forth in time. You never know who the villain is and who the hero is until the very end. And it uses my favorite Frank Sinatra album, the excessive A Man Alone, written by Rod McEwen.
Yes.
But it uses it really well. It uses it very sincerely. It's I think the greatest unproduced screenplay I've ever read, certainly.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now.
Was it Zmuda that wrote it?
It was Kaufman and Zmuda.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really if you've never read it, oh man, are you in for a good time? You won't be able to put the sucker down. It's really good.
Cool.
Yeah, okay, I found it.
You'll love it.
So. But I did watch actually a YouTube video of Tony Clifton, like Kaufman as Clifton, but you also see in Kaufman's stand-up a lot of him practicing wrestling moves as not just himself but as Clifton as well, which is really fun to see. You could tell he was very serious about his performance.
Have either of you seen My Breakfast with Blassie?
Yeah, I saw that.
It's a really interesting bad movie. It's almost unwatchable, but it's so perfectly pretentious, and the best performer in it is Blassie, who's terrible. But he's so wonderful in his terribleness that it can only be real life. You know,
they're spoofing My Dinner with Andre in every way.
Oh, yeah. Of course. I have a friend who lives in Los Angeles who has a daughter who's now like 15 or 16. But when her daughter was 10, this girl is she's some kind of a savant. She knew about Tony Clifton and worshipped Tony Clifton, and she went to a Halloween party in full Tony Clifton drag. The mustache, the fake chin, the hairline, the pot belly, the whole 9 yards. And she put it, I'll try to find it. She posted a picture of it on Facebook. This was 5 years ago or so. It's just unbelievable.
Nice.
That's my favorite kid.
No.
This kid is brilliant. This kid is an actress. She's a singer. She's brilliant. Her mother's got a flair for the dramatic, but she's a flight attendant out of LA. So
nice. There's so many scenes in this movie. What did you guys think of Jerry Lawler in this movie?
He's really good.
He is, and it's clear that he has a great deal of affection for Andy too.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, there was an interview. I give credit. Jerry Lawler was somebody who always sold the gimmick. There was an interview done about Andy's passing when Andy Kaufman had passed away. They interviewed Jerry Lawler, and he goes, "Look, if I pass away, if something happens to me, I hope you don't go up to Jimmy Hart and ask him to, pay respects to me or something because he was doing it to Jimmy Hart.
He kayfabe for years after the died.
Well, so a year before this movie came out, Zamunda wrote a book, and part of the big thing in the book is that he outed the wrestling thing.
Yeah.
Because it had not been outed at all, and
Lawler confirmed it. Once that had happened, he confirmed it.
Yeah, and he had to do that because the movie was coming out.
Yeah.
And the fakeness of it was in the movie.
Movie, right.
Lawler is, it's the only way they can really accurately pull the schmata off this.
Right.
Is to have Lawler on screen going, this was a great moment in the history of wrestling. And, and how affectionate they were towards each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this was ahead of it. What they pulled off in wrestling was ahead of its time because wrestling really didn't have like celebrities come from the outside world into wrestling.
Huge.
No, it was huge. And after that, then you had that explosion in the WWE with Cyndi Lauper, showing up and all of that. So it became this magnified to a magnitude of 10 carnival. It had always been a carnival, but it became this gigantic thing and Kaufman was it. I mean, he was the guy that really started it. He and Lawler.
So I have a question for you guys, sir. Are you guys going to go to the Peacock Network after this and watch the Chamber of Horrors match at all?
I might not do it immediately, but I will do it. Just because I am in for the bizarre.
Yeah. Straight out of Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
It's a crazy match. But yeah, I really like the choreography of the wrestling matches here done by Jim Carrey. He does a really good job of channeling Kaufman's energy for wrestling. Mm-hmm. And you've heard Jerry Lawler has said many times, and so has Jim Cornette, how much Andy respected wrestling, went backstage and talked to the boys. I mean, that was
he took
to
it
hear
totally
that
seriously.
Yeah. I mean, really, really nice to hear. I mean, to hear how nice of a guy he really was. And I think some people get lost sometimes that, hey, these people are performers, are putting on an act, not just in wrestling, but with Andy's case too. I think it was easy to vilify him for many people.
Mm-hmm. And people forget how young Andy was too.
Yeah.
Now that he's sort of this institution of sort of.
How old was he when he died?
35.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So when he was doing this, he was, 32, 31, 32, somewhere in there. So, yeah, he was. People sort of carve him in marble as a performance artist now. And he
becomes like Victor Buono.
Yeah.
Who died when he was 43 or something.
42, 43, yeah.
Yeah.
If Andy Kaufman hadn't died at such a young age, do you guys think he'd be in the WWE today?
No.
No, he'd move on to something else. He'd be doing something else crazy, or he'd be writing something else crazy by this time, because he'd be 75 years old if he was.
I think he would have gone full on Doug Henning. No, I'm not kidding.
I know what you're talking about. I do.
Yeah.
That's why I
He would have left show business and gotten back into TM and just stayed there.
Yeah. That's some reason all that. Yeah.
What's your favorite memory of the late Andy Kaufman?
The Letterman show, because I saw that the night it happened. I don't know if it's favorite memory. It certainly is one of the most outstanding memories. The funniest Kaufman moment was the freshness of that first Saturday Night Live appearance, where if you have not heard of him, Mighty Mouse comes from out of bloody nowhere.
Yeah.
And just is the most delightfully surreal moment this side of early Paul Rubens.
And then he nails Elvis, and nobody expects him to do it.
He was, to be official about it, on the record, he was Elvis's favorite Elvis impersonator.
Yeah.
Al, what's your favorite memory of the late Andy Kaufman?
It's the first performance on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
It was a revelation.
Oh,
Never seen anything like it before.
Yeah.
And I continually thank him for that revelation, because it opened up a lot of ideas in my head about what creativity could be.
And
There's some-
just as icing on the cake, honestly, that first lyric, what he says, what he literally says in that first lyric, has a lot of weight to it.
Here I come to save.
Here
the
I
day.
come to save the day. And he did. Yeah.
Yeah. Hell of a performer, the late Andy Kaufman was, and played by one hell of a performer comedian in Jim Carrey.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Carrey nails this role. Right, Danny DeVito does do a great job. I agree with you guys. In this movie, really, really, and I know he worked with Andy Kaufman on Tax.
Oh, Danny DeVito, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
DeVito.
Absolutely, he did, and of course they had the rest of the entire cast come back to film those select scenes.
Which is interesting because Jim Conway did not like Andy Kaufman very much
Right.
at all.
Right. No.
Mm.
And sometimes, what's his name didn't like him either. He got frustrated with him a few times.
Was it Judd Hirsch?
No, not Judd Hirsch. Although he may have as well. The guy that was
Lloyd.
who ended up in
No?
Who's the Boss. He tells stories about how he got mad at Andy, but he couldn't stay mad at him.
Who?
The guy that was on Who's the Boss later on.
Oh, Tony
Danza. Tony Danza.
Yeah, intellectual giant Tony Danza.
Yeah, I know, but he couldn't stay mad at him. You know?
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good.
he couldn't stay mad at him. He'd get upset with him, and then he just like, well, it's Andy. Okay, you know. Yeah, no, he didn't hold a grudge at all. I have to tell you, there are two moments in this movie that really affected me the most, and one of them is when he goes to get the spiritual doctor treatment, and he sees it. He sees what it is, and he just laughs. It's the irony of the whole thing, and that's so in the character of Andy Kaufman. It's a brilliant moment.
I'm undone by my own tools.
Yeah. And the other thing is the whole Carnegie Hall thing. I wish to God I had been able to go to that and be a part of that moment.
Yeah. So much positivity, so much joy that he just allowed to build.
Yeah.
With no apologies.
No.
Yeah, great. This is a really fun movie. I give this a solid 9.5. Really, really fun movie to watch. And a lot of great performances in it, too. What do you guys give it?
10.
Yeah, I balance you out and give it a 12.
There you go.
Good.
I adore this movie, and I adore the subject matter. Great.
Yeah, it's really, really. We're doing a documentary tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jim and Andy.
It's Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond. That one is on Netflix.
Okay, I'll check it. I'm going to check it out tomorrow.
It'll be interesting to see your response.
Mm-hmm.
I heard about this. Well, here's the thing. I heard about this a little bit because again, when this movie was made, Monday Night Raw was plugging this movie.
Oh yeah,
and Jerry Lawler had talked about the documentary a bit about Andy and me. I forget what he had said though. So there's going to be a lot of things in the description box. There's going to be a link to the Tonight Show Smack.
it's Letterman. Yeah,
Letterman.
Yeah.
David. I'm going to try to find the interviews or the conversation Jim Cornette was having about Andy Kaufman as well, because he was the ring photographer for Memphis Wrestling. So yeah, there's links to Patrick McCray's Dark Shadows Daybook about. It's going to be description box too. and link to Alan Gallant's YouTube channel, Colin Sport After Dark, is going to be in the description box. Before we go, guys, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just want you I want to alleviate the confusion between the Tonight Show and Letterman. If he had pulled that stunt on the Tonight Show, he would have been banned from entertainment coast to coast. Johnny Carson would have never seen the humor in anything like that. He just
that extreme. Going that far,
Yeah.
Up to a certain point, Carson would have been all for it.
Yes, he had a good sense of humor. I'm not saying he didn't, but he didn't. He didn't connect with that.
That's creating that much danger.
Yeah.
Can I tell you another little weird wrestling moment that happened too? But before we go, Chucky from Child's Play appeared on the WCW Titantron once upon a time. Okay, good night.
Good night, Shul.
That is a Kaufman-esque moment.
Yes, good night.
Good night.